not perhaps the... Welcome to Washington Arbitration Week, third edition. We have the pleasure of having our noon panel of our second day in Washington, D.C. I would like to thank again Miller and Chevalier for their hosting, incredible hosting. We have a lovely view of Washington, D.C. from here. And we are joined by our panelists, and I will not steal the thunder of our moderator. I will simply like to share in introducing her that Amanda Lee is an international arbitrator, and she is many things. Among others, she is a consultant also at Costigan King, and she is the founder of Arb Balance and Careers in Arbitration. Not only that, she is incredibly talented in the use of professional media. You can learn a lot from her, and she's very much a force, both related to women in arbitration, careers in arbitration, and now Arb Balance, which is focused on creating mental and work balance in arbitration, which as you may have experienced or are likely to experience, is not a stress-free profession. When we talked with Amanda about the panel, she said to me, okay, there's interest to do the panel, but you have to sort of guarantee that you will record this session. And we're very happy to say that all the panels of Washington Arbitration Week are being recorded. They're not only being recorded, but each panel will have an automatic transcript. So if you want to look into stress, for instance, in the panel of today, or if you want to look into jokes or irony into the panel of the last panel, you can do that too. So you will be able to use it as a research tool, and hopefully others will be seeing the panel. You don't have to watch the whole 100 or 100 minutes, but you can do a search with that. On the screen are supporters and also sponsors. We're grateful to them. And with that, I will give the floor to Amanda to address the topic that I believe one of the purposes is to demystify it. We're very, very grateful for your attendance. We're very grateful for the attendance from our panelists in Paris and also in Spain. And take it away, Amanda.
Well, thank you very much, Jose Antonio. Thank you for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Riding the Arbitration Bicycle, the importance of achieving balance in your arbitration career. Thank you to Washington Arbitration Week for giving us the opportunity to address you today on this important topic, and to our generous hosts, Miller and Chevalier, for having us. Now, before I turn the floor over to our distinguished panel, who are next to me and behind me on the screen, I want to explain why this topic matters to me and why it should matter to all of you. So let me start by saying that this panel is co-sponsored by two initiatives that I founded. The first, Careers in Arbitration, enjoys a following of more than 50,000 people in our community. It helps arbitration practitioners of all levels, from students to aspiring arbitrators and partners, to find opportunities in our challenging and competitive field. I don't mind if you angle the camera so you can't see me. I'm perfectly content with that. Don't worry, it's probably for the best. And make no bones about it, this is a challenging and competitive field. As our distinguished panel will be explaining shortly, riding the arbitration bicycle can, at the very least, leave you with saddle sores, which anyone who rides bicycles will recognize. Now, the second, Arb Balance, was founded earlier this year with the express purpose of helping our community to not only secure and develop careers in arbitration, but to enjoy long, happy, and healthy careers in arbitration. So what does that mean in reality? Is it even possible to enjoy a happy and healthy career in arbitration? Anybody think it is? I'm really worried that nobody's put their hand up at the beginning, and I've only asked that one question. Well, Albert Einstein once said, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Now, we have perfected the art of constant movement in this field. To succeed, in addition to being great lawyers, we need to moonlight as writers, speakers, event planners, and so much more. Now, whether that translates into balance is another matter. So, who in this room, hand on heart, thinks they've achieved a good, sustainable balance between their work life and other aspects of their life? For those watching at home, nobody has put their hand up. Don't be shy, hands up. Anybody feel they've achieved this? No. If anybody had raised their hand, I would have said you're doing better than I was just over 10 years ago. Who in this room would describe themselves as stressed? And ideally for reasons other than because I'm forcing you to interact with me, okay? I know audience interaction is stressful. Okay.
My boss is here.
Your boss is here. Okay, all right. I acknowledge that. That's good. There may be a vested reason why some people are not raising their hand, or they're raising it very small level so only they can see it. Can anyone tell me, what does stress actually do to the body? Any ideas? What does stress do to you? You forget things? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're probably going to start getting sick a little bit more often because your immune system's all over the place.
You feel tired, exhausted.
Absolutely. Tiredness, exhaustion, anything else? Yeah, pretty much. Fundamentally, it absolutely does. It will kill you if you're not careful. So let me share a few insights. I'm going to tell you a personal story now. I'm sorry in advance. So about 10 years ago, I sat in a clinical psychologist's office and I was told if I didn't slow down, my body would be slowing down for me, and that would be that. And a week or so later, I went to see a gastroenterological neurological psychiatrist. I promise that is a real title. That is a doctor with 3 specializations. That guy, you can imagine his medical school bills. And he explained to me in medical school terminology, so it was like a medical school lecture, for which, yes, I did have to pay, but at least I was getting a tiny bit of medical school, exactly what was going on in my body. And it was not a pretty picture. So as you may all know, we have 2 nervous systems operating in our bodies. Did you know this? Yeah? Anyone who didn't, you've learned something today. When you comment on social media about Washington Arbitration Week, you say, I learned things today, okay? So we've got these two systems, and these make up what we call the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the reason why we have the fight or flight response. Everybody's heard of fight or flight, right? You're trying to resist doing it now, I can tell. And that's the system that kicks into gear if we find ourselves facing a saber-toothed tiger or a poisonous snake or a particularly unpleasant arbitrator. It pumps us full of adrenaline and cortisol. It diverts blood from our digestive system to our limbs so we can run for our lives. It's probably best not to do that mid-hearing, however strong the urge, but still. In contrast, we have the parasympathetic nervous system, and that's all about resting and digesting. It's responsible for making sure that we sleep and we digest our food properly. It has an important job, but it's highly strung and it's prone to going awry. It's a little bit like arbitration lawyers. Unfortunately, when we are under severe stress for a long time, our bodies basically lose the ability to properly grade threats. And so while poisonous snakes should rightly be regarded as a life-threatening foe, extremely stressed people lose the ability to recognize that things like socks, which are a similar shape to snakes, I acknowledge, but they're nowhere near as long. So socks and filing deadlines are not serious threats. And so my poor battered body was constantly getting flooded with a load of stress hormones that it didn't need, and I had nowhere to put them. And the result, rapid weight loss, ketosis, chronic insomnia, sensory disturbances, brain fog, hair loss, memory problems, gut problems, and that's no laughing matter for someone who already lives with a functional bowel disorder. And ocular migraines. You ever heard of an ocular migraine? This is a migraine where you have no pain, but you're trying to read. Everything to the left of your field of vision just disappears. It's like being in the Matrix and there's a glitch. I don't recommend it. And I really don't recommend sitting the New York bar exam when you have all of these symptoms. Anybody sat the New York bar exam, DC bar exam? If you haven't, you have it to look forward to. Unless you're one of those people who plays computer games and you like to do everything at the really high difficulty level, do not struggle with burnout when doing a bar exam. All of this was caused by severe, prolonged stress. I've now frozen, so that would have been a very ominous moment on the screen. Okay, 90+ hour weeks, minimal sleep, constant deadlines, bad diet, no vacations. I haven't had one in 10 years, still. The result basically of riding the arbitration bicycle. So when we talk about burnout, when we joke about being workaholics, that's what it actually looks like and feels like from the inside. And that's what we are doing to ourselves. And for the more senior people in the room, it's probably what we're doing to some of our associates. It shouldn't be seen as a badge of pride. It needs to be recognized for what it is. It is a form of self-harm. We are doing this to ourselves voluntarily, people. So it took me 2 years and a hell of a lot of yoga to reverse all of those physical symptoms 3 times a week. That's a lot of yoga. I don't want any of you and anybody listening from home to be like me. Do not follow me. I am not a good example. And that was 10 years ago. So luckily I'm no longer having those problems. I may have other problems now. You might have concluded that based on hearing me speak today. This woman likes to share too much information. That could be one of the problems. But today, the purpose of today's panel is to try and find better ways of doing what we love. And so that brings us to all of these lovely people that we have in the room today and on the screen above me to talk about today's topic. So sometimes life makes it difficult for those of us working in this field to develop and maintain that sustainable work-life balance that we all need to progress personally and professionally. Now, the pandemic brought the importance of well-being to the forefront with research undertaken by the International Bar Association, and Manel's going to tell you a bit about that soon. The DC Bar Association, Nikki's going to tell you a bit about that. New York State Bar Association, I don't think anyone's going to tell you about that, but you never know, somebody might. And it's indicative of a mental health crisis in the legal profession. So we need to keep this topic front of mind. And today, we're going to look at the scope of the problem. We're going to explore ways in which we can promote and achieve balance in our personal and professional lives. So our panelists today are not going to be telling you horror stories about their experiences with burnout. Hurrah, you all say. They're going to be sharing some practical tips and tricks to help you all as you try to achieve rewarding and healthy careers in arbitration. So no one will be falling off the arbitration bicycle today. We will have time for questions at the end. Please save your questions. We look forward to answering them in due course. And so that finally, hurrah, brings us to our first speaker. And so Nikki Irish is the Outreach and Education Coordinator at the DC Bar Lawyer Assistance Program, where she focuses on raising awareness and reducing the stigma of mental health and addiction issues. And she's going to be sharing some insights from the DC Bar with us today. So take it away, Nikki.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that story. Before I jump in, I'm going to recommend a book because it made me think about this. It's called actually Burnout. It's by 2 sisters. Their last names are Nagoski, Nagoski. And it really walks you through in very layman's terms how to address burnout and how to address the stress cycle. And I think it's really accessible. If you have not read it, it's worthwhile to proactively read or when you're in it deep. So when I was asked to talk about this, I have so many things to say. I've been doing this specifically with the lawyers for 12 years and have a lot of thoughts on well-being. So I'm trying to pare it down in very short. And what I'm going to talk about is really the DC Bar's kind of recent findings. So last year, actually in 2020, with the data was collected, last year it was published. They partnered with the DC Bar, partnered with the California Bar and Patrick Krill to do a survey of members and really to look at specific risk factors that contributed to well-being issues. I'm going to talk about 3 of them today. There is a lot more out there about it, but I think that these 3 kind of lay the framework for the rest of the conversation that the panelists are going to have. So, and demystifying, I think I heard earlier, which I really like that's really the goal, right? Create normalcy around the struggle so then people are much more apt to seek help for it. First one in 4 women essentially at the time of this survey were seriously contemplating leaving the profession related to mental health and burnout issues. I don't think that's particularly surprising, but it is validating and emphasizing, right, on what kind of needs to be done. And then actually when they looked at stress, depression, anxiety, and hazardous drinking, women exceeded men in all of those categories. So, which actually was surprising to people. Often there's a perception that men drink more than women, because I think it is visual more in men than women is what they see. But anyway, so women essentially are struggling significant. There's a gender disparity in that women are struggling in the profession. So things that the bar is doing on a very, this is small scale, right? But we started a women's support group, an online group. So every Wednesday, you can meet with other women, law students and lawyers who can essentially share the struggles of profession and personal life. So creating space and connection, finding women's bar associations, affinity groups in law firms, whatever that is, but where you can create space to be supported and seen by other women, I think is really important. So that would be one of the things that I would say. Other than, in essentially structural changes, structural changes that are really important. So women, young lawyers, they struggle 2 to 4 times the rate of their older colleagues. And this is seen in survey after survey. It was also seen in this DC bar survey. The goal is to start in law school. So I heard law school here. There's a lot that is actually being done. There is professional identity development is now kind of a requirement by the ABA in law school, and it includes well-being. So starting in law school, mentoring programs outside of work are essential. Conversations with onboarding new employees. We sometimes go into firms and have conversations with the incoming first years or summer associates about what it means to take care of yourself. How do you really do that in this profession, and have honest conversations around that? So the struggle of younger attorneys, and then that the workplace and relationships truly do matter. So one of the things that came out from the study was that lawyers essentially in environments where this isn't surprising, but lawyers in environments where they felt valued for kind of their talent and skill set and basically being humans, were much better physically and mentally, and that they stayed at their jobs, right? So the attrition was seen where with lawyers who essentially felt that they were in transactional relationships with their employees. And so that was particularly emphasized actually and seen in larger firms, that transactional relationship, and by lawyers who identified as not white. They felt that they were not valued by their employers and that they weren't given feedback that they wanted and needed. And those are simple things that colleagues and employees can do, right? You can have regular conversations with your employees. You can check in with them. You can give them feedback. You can send a quick 1-sentence email that says, "Thanks so much for your help on this project. I really appreciate it." Those simple things over time, when done regularly, actually significantly improve well-being. And then right, like that connection piece. The other part is data shows that lawyers who can connect to their why, like why you're doing the work you're doing, is essential for their own well-being. So that's something on an individual level that you can do and connect with. One of the things the bar does, because there are a lot of solo and small firm attorneys we have at the DC bar. They have a practice management advisory services that focuses on solo and small firms. And they do a lot of programming as ways to engage and network and find your community and connect in those places. And then my position, actually, I've been at the bar for 12 years, but my position was created 2 years ago. So we could really just focus on having these conversations, showing up in places like this, have somebody dedicated to elevating the conversation. And I won't go into the stigma because somebody else on the panel is going to do that, but that was part of the reason my position is created, to reduce the stigma so we can increase access to help. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kirsten.
Thank you very much, Nikki, for those interesting insights. Being valued for being human, I don't think that's too much to ask, really, as a kind of bare minimum requirement. So we're going to hear from Kirsten now. Kirsten Teo is a Singaporean advocate and solicitor and special legal consultant at Decker's Washington, D.C. office, managing commercial and investment arbitrations, especially those within Asia and U.S. nexus.
Thanks so much, Mandy and Nikki. I think the statistics are enlightening and they definitely resonate with me. I think as a cautionary tale, I think it's important and timely that Mandy has raised this issue. I remember several years ago when I started in practice, a senior associate, an acquaintance in the firm, had a heart attack at his desk at 29. And so it was like a wake-up call because you're working so hard, but you don't realize what you're doing to yourself in terms of the stress levels, and the mental health issues can manifest itself into physical ailments. So I think it's very timely that Amanda has created this art balance to remind us to take care of ourselves, to find balance in what we do. And when Nikki said you got to keep in mind why you're doing what you're doing, I think it's important to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. For instance, as a junior associate, you'll be doing, the more nitty-gritty part of the, submissions, the filings, when you're binding, when you're doing research and you're printing out the exhibits, you're asking yourself in the office, like, why am I doing this, right? It's like midnight. You're still, taking care of the prints. And at the time, you're not really enjoying it, right? Because it's the laborious task of the submission. But if you look ahead and you know why you're doing this, you'll realize this is part of the training. You have to understand that career is a marathon and not a sprint. And whatever you learn now will help you stand in good stead when you get more senior and you're able to, do other things. But it's always good to know how it works, because on a Sunday, on the weekend, when you have to actually finalize the memorials and you have no one to call, you know exactly how to take care of the submissions. So I think you got to know why you're doing certain things that you're doing, and that will help you to sort of look ahead, right? Not be caught up in the difficulties, challenges faced. And one thing that also resonated when Nikki shared the statistics is I think it shows the challenges that working women face. You're playing two roles every day. You have your job, and then you go home and you have your other job, right? Because you still have the caregiving roles at home. You're also a sibling, your child, you have to take care of your parents, you have to take care of your, loved ones. And I think that there's a dual role that we play. And so I think, and I am just curious here, how many of us are like at our optimal best, where we can be focused at work if there's chaos at home, like our loved ones are ill and they need tending to. Is anybody optimal at work, like 100% focused when you have things, at home? It's challenging because sometimes it's at the back of your mind when you're working. Oh, I know that, someone's ill, I have to tend to them. So I think that the home life has to be somewhat in order, I think, so that you can be your optimal best at work. I think for most of us, I also don't recommend hazardous drinking, because I think that's not a permanent solution. It's not ideal. It's a temporary fix to some. One thing I did learn in Stockholm, is this word lagom. Lagom means balanced, everything in moderation. So this is one thing I learned from the Swedes, that everything in life has to be in moderation, balanced, not too much, not too little, just right. And so I think that's a good reminder, because our lifestyle has to be in moderation and to be sustainable. So if you want a career that's long lasting, that's meaningful, don't burn yourself out. It's definitely not a sprint. So I think the recommendations and resources provided by the DC Bar are very much welcome. It's timely that we talk about this. And I hope that it encourages dialogue like we have today, reduce isolation, and please reach out to people in your community, the DC Bar Association, affinity groups, young practitioner groups, your family and friends, because you're not alone in this. And I hope you'd be able to find resources that can help you and give you a support network that would be essential, I think, for taking the job in the long run. So I hope that if you have any questions, please let us know. So thanks, Mandy.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. A bit of lagom for all of us, I think, is no bad thing. So we turn now to our next speaker. Manal Atsarias Luque is a lawyer from Barcelona and a member of the International Bar Association Wellbeing Task Force. He founded and chaired the Mental Health Institute of Legal Professions in Spain for 3 years. For those in the room, you can see him in the top corner there. Everybody else can see him on their screen too. And so, Manel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, first I want to thank Amanda Lee for her invitation to participate in this event. It's fantastic that top international arbitrators like Amanda are sensitive to mental health issues in the legal industry. One of the biggest challenges the international legal community will face for the following decade is how legal professionals practice law without undermining their mental health. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the current legal practice is sustainable and healthy? And my answer is clear: no, not at all. According to the first global study published by the International Bar Association Wellbeing Task Force regarding legal professionals' mental well-being in 2021, our collective, speaking in the broad sense, is at stake. The data speak for themselves. First, as to the World Health Organization -5 Mental Wellbeing Index, the average overall score of legal professionals was 51%. It should be noted that a score below 52% is an indicator for a health professional to screen for depression. This score is still lower if we classify these legal professionals depending on their age, gender, ethnicity, and disability. For instance, while women's and ethnic minorities scores were 47%, people with disabilities and young lawyers, 23 to 29, but I mean, it's this segment, receive the lowest scores, 45 and 43% respectively. Second, concerning mental health stigma, 41% wouldn't discuss mental well-being concerns with their employer for fear it may harm their professional career. The main reasons for legal professionals wouldn't be willing to speak out about this condition are three: fear of being treated differently as a result, 32.1%. The employer doesn't sufficiently recognize mental well-being issues, 24.1%. And fear of not being believed or taken seriously, 17.1%. In addition to these data, I want to emphasize another phenomenon that provokes mental health problems in the legal community. I'm referring to bullying and sexual harassment. In 2019, the International Bar Association published a report under which 1 in 2 females and 1 in 3 males are bullied in legal workplaces. And 1 in 3 females and 1 in 14 males have been sexually harassed in a work context. Considering these results, our task force enacted the 10 mental well-being principles for legal professionals, also included in the report that I've just added in the chat. Right, you can access in the report. Well, mainly I want to mention some of these principles. Okay, first of all, raising awareness is essential to breaking the stigma surrounding mental health. In recent years, some bar associations like the American Bar Association, Commission on Lawyer Assistance Programs, the Canada, the UK, and Ireland have carried out awareness raising campaigns to promote help-seeking behaviors among lawyers suffering from mental health conditions. The main idea of these campaigns is clear, is to send a strong message and say seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Another principle is based on sharing good practices and learning from others. Bar associations, law firms, corporate legal departments, and other organizations should share their mental well-being initiatives, policies, and know-how with the legal community. And another issue is adopting a mental well-being policy is urgent for every legal institution. In the report, according to our study, 82% of institutions, bar associations, law firms, okay, say they take mental health seriously. Nonetheless, only 16% provide training for senior management. Maybe I don't know in the US, but for instance, in the United Kingdom, there are some law firms which are providing mental health first aid training. I know that in the US you have this program, but I don't know to what extent the American law firms are implementing this kind of trainings. But it seems to me that it's a very powerful tool to raise awareness of the importance of taking care of our mental health and to provide tools with lawyers to manage different situations. In Spain, well, in my country, the situation is completely different. I mean, I created the Mental Health Institute of Legal Profession, and due to the lack of funding, this institution doesn't exist. But I don't know, but I think that in the US, you have the lawyer assistance programs, each bar association, and the UK, for instance, they have the Locker, a non-profit organization which was founded in 1997. And when I saw what you are doing in this field, I'm very jealous, because I think, oh, come on, we can do a lot of things, but we need to change the legal culture. To me, this is the main point. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Manel. Stigma is a very real problem, particularly when we're talking about these sort of well-being issues. And if you do have the opportunity to do mental health first aider training, I strongly recommend it. It's one of the first things I did when I got to the States. I spent 4 afternoons doing mental health first aider training. And it really is very interesting. It helps you to have conversations you may not otherwise be accustomed to having. So let's hear now from Munia. Munia El Harti Alonso is of counsel in international arbitration at Robelino Law, based in Quito and Paris, and a PhD applicant at Universidad Complutense de Madrid. I apologize to all the Spanish speakers for traumatizing the pronunciation of that particular institution. She's also a young ICA representative for Latin America. So over to you, Munia.
Thank you, Mandy, and I would say good pronunciation. So thank you, Manel, for dismantling stigma through the work you've been doing for years and for talking about it. And I was staggered by statistics of the latest International Bar Association Young Lawyers report that indicates that 33% of young lawyers years 1 to 5 will be leaving law firms for another field. So not lateraling firm to firm, but just going through another field in law, and 1/5 leaving law altogether. And this report identifies the billable hour metric for lawyers' performance amongst other factors as highly problematic. I think it's for paramount importance for young lawyers to be cognizant of those trends and issues, and also for the profession at large, mainly leaders and seniors, even those hearing us today, to critically rethink certain modus operandi that is causing an important turnover within the profession. So that was my comment on the stigma and everything that Manel talks about. That is very enlightening.
Thank you very much, Minia. So we now turn the floor over to Kirsten. We're going to move now from some of the theory to some more practical insights from practitioners. With the benefit of hindsight and 11 years of practice, it's going to be a bit of soul searching there. She will explore the challenges of cross-border practice and their potential impact on mental well-being. And she'll share some top tips to keep you all balanced. So Kirsten, over to you.
I certainly hope I can meet Amanda's expectations on these topics. But, when many students, I think, ask, we'd like to, know why you're in arbitration, we'd also like to join arbitration. I think what many don't realize is the exacting demands that are imposed on us in practice. And that's what I wanted to share with those who are interested to know more about the practice, but I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen, the consequences of that. And I know many joining us online and here in the room, that international arbitration is by nature cross-border, which means that we work across different jurisdictions, different time zones. It also means it's a 24/7 practice. There is no such thing as weekends. Sometimes you have to put in the hours over the weekends, during holidays. The first 7 years, I worked every weekend, every holiday, and that's part of the work. And I think that's why I think the stress levels that some of us face can be tremendous. And I'm sure that many of you understand that, filing deadlines, hearing preparations require us to put in, the effort to, sometimes all-nighters are needed. I just completed a hearing, and I think we were up 22 hours a day with an hour break. So sometimes you have to put in the hours because, it's needed, is required. That's part and parcel of the arbitration practice, especially when you have hearings and submissions that are due. Many of you know that with cross-border transactions and arbitrations, sometimes the other side is in another continent. Currently, there's a 13-hour time difference with Singapore. So that means every time I have to schedule a call, it has to be early morning or very late at night for me. But I think it's important to also be adaptable, be flexible. So the work hours are not strictly 9 to 6. It's no longer possible to keep within those hours if you join international arbitration. And many of us, can understand that. So I think it's being flexible, adaptable to the needs, and finding ways to sort of take a break when you can, because litigation, arbitration is cyclical. So sometimes it's really busy, and sometimes, you can take a break. You don't have to put in those all-nighters. So that's part of the challenge of, being in practice. And I think what Nikki and Mandy shared about the attrition rates being the highest between years 1 to 5, it's true, I think, across, many countries. In Singapore, we have most attrition, most people leave in the first 3 years. And I think that's why it's important when Nikki said, you got to know why you're doing this, right? Because for the first 3 years, it's the hardest, it's the toughest. You're learning how to, put the bundles together, and you're like, why am I doing this? It's so mundane. What's the purpose of this? But I think if you look ahead beyond the 3 years, then you'll realize that, okay, it's part of the training process. And then from there, you can go on to do other things, substantive work. If there are other challenges, I think it's that because you're so caught up at work, something's got to give, right? So you're less at home. I think for me personally, in a personal note, I think the wake-up call was when I think my grandmother passed away, because I spent so much time working the first 7 years, and I didn't spend time with her. And when she passed, it was a wake-up call. So for me, I felt that I I sacrificed a lot on a personal level and I cannot turn back time to get that time with her. So I guess for all of us, it's different. Maybe it's, it's okay to put in those, years of hard work. And somehow I'm also happy to learn how people manage both family life and work life. But I think it's important to note that you got to set priorities. And that's where I will come to right after I discuss the potential impact on well-being. So Mandy and Nikki and Manel have also shared about burnout. I think it's real, it's severe. I didn't realize until it's a shock to the system. So when a friend had the heart attack at 29, I was like, my God, I think that's down the road for me. So you either crash and burn or you find a way to adapt and take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, then you can't do, what's expected of you at work because you're just not physically able to. And I think another aspect to our well-being is anxiety attacks, panic attacks, because, deadlines are coming up. Or how many of you have had applications, urgent interim applications every Friday night? Every Friday night. It's like, gosh, like sometimes, instead of looking forward to the weekend, you're like, oh God, something's going to happen on Friday night. So I think all of this stress could affect not just mental well-being, but also cause physical ailments. And I think that it's a vicious cycle, and that I think contributes to the high attrition rates. So I don't want to focus on the negative, but to sort of propose, recommend, maybe brainstorm with you what are some of the top tips. And in doing so, I hope that we form, a support network here, those of us online and in person, so that we can be each other's support networks. And, in New York, Amanda had her acronym PI for personal branding. So here I will suggest 3 Ps to be ARB balanced. So the first P is setting priorities for your life at home and at work. I think you need to take time to reflect and recalibrate as needed. Maybe you're at a stage where you need to spend more time at work. Sometimes you need to spend more time at home. So I think it's important to evaluate that. I think I was on the accelerating at work, but I think I sacrificed a lot on the personal front. So maybe it wasn't so balanced, but we live and we learn so that we can improve. So I think that's the first P. The second P I recommend, and happy to hear your views on this, is being able to reach out to people. Your support network, there's a saying, and I know some friends here joining us online, you have family, you have children to take care of, you have your parents, your loved ones to care for. It takes a village to do all of that. And at the same time, develop a sustainable career. How do you do both, right? My gosh, like what's expected of us? It's a lot. A very, very well-known and esteemed female arbitrator, who's actually a leader in one of the top arbitral courts. She once said to me this: our careers are not a linear progression graphically, if you can imagine. It's not linear. Sometimes what you think is a step down will turn out to be a stepping stone to greater things. And I was just, wow, because, I thought, okay, I have to do this. And then if I do this, I'll get to that. If I put in the hours, the work, it will naturally lead to, progression. But it doesn't always happen that way. And sometimes, you need to be more present at home, right? If your loved ones are ill. So I think that that was another piece of advice that to this day, 10 years later, I still try to keep that in mind. So this brings me to the third P. Establishing protocols with some flexibility. So how many of us take time to, de-stress, to not think about work? I thought I was doing fine until I was on the road driving. And then I actually drove onto the curb and almost crashed because I think my I was looking ahead, but my mind, went somewhere else. It swerved to what I had to do, what deadline was coming up. Oh my God, my hearing's coming up. I have to do this memorial, this filing. And even though I was driving and I was looking at the road, my mental consciousness drove me off the road. So I just felt that, okay, I wasn't mentally in a good condition to sort of take care of myself in a sense, right? So if I had driven off the road and crashed, I probably wouldn't have made it to the hearing. So I feel we need to take time, and I think that Amanda has raised an important issue that many of us are struggling to deal with. I mean, we're all finding ways to balance, and it's not always 50-50. We're not always 50% at home and at work. So I think it's important to take care of ourselves, because otherwise everything's just going to crash and burn. So I think these are the 3 Ps. I wish it could have fit into pie, but so, and I'm of course happy to discuss and brainstorm ideas as to how recommendations that you may have as well to these points, and hopefully we'll be able to find some balance in arbitration.
I think it's definitely a worthwhile goal, Kirsten. Thank you so much. So, yep, 3 Ps, everybody: priorities, people, and protocols. Because after all, happy, healthy lawyers tend to do a better job for their clients, and they also don't drive off the road, which is very important in life and when driving. So I will turn you over now to Nikki to share her views on these 3 Ps and other proposals.
Well, as you were talking, what I actually thought was, oh, I think I have 2 more Ps. It was unintentional, but so we're going to go 5 Ps. Permission. So giving ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, giving ourselves permission to evaluate the things that Kirsten talked about, giving ourselves permission to be a little compassionate with ourselves. I think permission really is a big piece. And then the permission connecting to pausing. I think the pause is essential. I think sometimes we are riding the bicycle so fast that we forget to pause. And I'm not talking about like you need to stop everything and screech, right? But like kind of slowing down, taking a minute in your just day to check in with actually how you're doing, right? I think so often we're going so fast that we stop paying attention to all the signals our body is giving us. When we talk about physical health, your physical health is tied to your mental health. They're intertwined and that you cannot disconnect them. Body, brain, all one part of us, right? So our body is giving us these signals all of the time, and often we just override them. So if we can pause throughout the day and pay attention to how we are feeling physically and emotionally, it will give us information. At the end of the day, emotions are just data points trying to tell us something. So we need to pay attention to them and figure out what we need. And at the end of the day, self-care is identifying what our needs are and then getting them met. It's nothing more than that. Sometimes it is literally to take have a drink of water and eat something because we haven't been paying attention to that. Sometimes it's I'm feeling lonely and I need to reach out to a friend. Sometimes it's I just need to get a breath of fresh air because I've been sitting, inside all day for 22 hours, whatever that is. But so kind of pausing and reflecting. So I would say kind of permission and then pausing are the P's that I would add.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I still, to this day, my mom writes to me in the morning and goes, remember to eat, remember to drink something. And she does this nearly every day, regardless of where she is in the world or where I am in the world. So that brings us to our last but not least speaker. So Munia is going to be addressing us on balance in her practice. And so Munia, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. So my topic today is one I care deeply about. It's business development, BD, and academia as part of professional diversity in international arbitration, a pathway to foster a nonlinear professional growth for young lawyers, which is something that actually Kirsten mentioned in the quote she gave, that was very enlightening, of the light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe there is light at the beginning as well. So I will really focus on the challenges of balancing academia, business development, and practice, difficulties that may be raised by law firms, and how to balance those different aspects in your professional development. So I think for young lawyers in particular, it is key to find purpose and to be empowered to navigate your career with your own voice. This is the real why that was mentioned at the beginning as well. And my first traineeship actually consisted of repeated months of 20 hours a day, sometimes 22, sometimes 23 hours a day of work. And it's actually a critical mindset, mentors, and a training in government and academia that made me critically think this grinding mentality is actually not okay. It is not productive. And there are other ways of working, and I shall not mystify or idealize a law firm. We talked about demystifying as well. ultimately firms are humans like you and I behind it. And a lot of it had to do with somewhat understaffing and a bit of a lack of organization, frankly. So as to the challenges, the billable hours measure of performance solely based on billables, and required numbers are unattainable, say 70 hours a week-ish is numbers I've heard. It's not in your contract, but that's what you're required to do. Make professional development very difficult. Manuel will touch a little bit upon the billable hours. And a certain old school mentality, pyramidal organization in the structure of firms, the mystification of what a firm is, makes it difficult for young lawyers to have professional growth at the outset, meaning having a diverse profile, BD for the firm, business development for themselves, existing in the firm, as some juniors and mid-level are not necessarily exposed to clients, even if they work on the cases. And most importantly, outside of the firm, which is very important, especially in the arbitral community. We are an arbitral community, so it is important you engage with it, as well as your bar association. There's also a saturation of international arbitration, sadly, in our field and in the latest years. It's what Professor Guido Tawil calls the unwitting victims of international arbitration success, where actually he points out that having a multifaceted profile is something that can help you in a scarce market. So that fits in with having an academic diverse profile and developing BD. But there are also benefits to breaking the mold. Diversity, and specifically professional diversity in international arbitration, is needed to attract different backgrounds, but also talent. Professional diversity has a positive spillover over other types of diversity, such as gender diversity, such as academia doesn't have a nonlinear remuneration structure, and women thrive in academia, actually. So those are positive things. Academia also fosters expertise, exposure through publication, speaking engagements, organizing conferences. All of that actually is not only academia. It seems very theory, but that is actually part of business development. You would see partners teaching in conferences and publishing books. So it is not so academic at the end of the day, and it has a lot of benefits. Arbitration is also globally competitive, top down for experts, counsels, and arbitrators, which means it is key for lawyers to craft their own identity beyond the firm as soon as possible. So solutions. An academic career, for instance, in parallel is possible with an increasing amount of tailored programs, remote part-time PhDs. I want to tell you it is possible. I've been doing it for a couple of years. I've been working and doing my PhD, and I will be done in a couple of months. So punctual teaching position slots, also possible for associates. Good time management is something that was touched upon by Kirsten, is crucial to juggle several hats. And BD, actually, business development for year one, junior associates, is mandated in certain jurisdictions, such as France. You have bars and courts monitoring that very carefully. In France, the firm must allocate time to the associate to develop its own clientele and grow. And actually, courts do sanction that, especially because lawyers in France are all independent contractors. So they pay their own health insurance and retirement benefits. And therefore, because they are independent contractors, they are independent and should have their own clientele as well. There are efforts, of course, by some law firms to support their lawyers, and a growing diversity in the organization of law firms themselves, with boutiques, where both billable culture and a stratified hierarchy are shifting, which is welcomed, and commendable work by bar associations to protect young lawyers from being trapped in a corporate environment where growth is precluded. There's reports, the one I cited before, the IBA Young Lawyers Report. I encourage you to read it, and the report that Manel sent out. Mentoring programs are very, very important, such as the Young ICA mentoring program. The Racial Equality for Arbitration Lawyers gives very good scholarships for young lawyers to attend. prestigious events, and the Rising Arbitrators Initiative, let's say for mid-levels or more seniors, to cite a few. So I think with all of this, it's also in the hands of young lawyers to develop those soft but indispensable skills to find the right fit in a law firm where they can truly grow. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Minia. I think it's quite right that it's the next generation that are going to have to make some of these changes. And there's a lot of younger people in the room today who are definitely younger than me. And it's going to be interesting to see what you as the next generation of arbitration practitioners start expecting from this profession. Because at the end of the day, law firms are always going to want the best talent. And if the price of getting the best talent is treating your associates a little tiny bit better and accepting that maybe they have lives and maybe they're not just walking hat stands. And I say walking hat stands because we all wear so many hats nowadays. So you've got your lawyer hat, you've got your person who has children, or your partner hat, or your speaker hat, or your academic hat, or, you know, dog parent hat, whatever hat you might be wearing. We can't just be walking hat stands. So I'm going to turn the floor over now to Manel to share his views on this topic. So over to you, Manel.
I'm a very combative person, and well, for the last years, I've had the opportunity to meet many lawyers around the world, and some of them practice law in big law firms, and they are afraid of talking about openly their mental health. In my view, we are living in a mental health crisis in the legal profession. And if we are talking about the business sector in the broad sense, I mean, big law firms, I think that the culture of billable hour and up or out culture undermine lawyers' mental well-being. According to a study made by Yale Law School in 2017, a lawyer must work 2,420 hours to bill 1,800, and 2,200 billable hours require a lawyer to be working 3,048 hours. Considering that the scientific community has concluded that long working hours affect neural processes, atrophy the cognitive function of workers, and entail progressive deterioration of their physical and mental health, it's unavoidable to ask the following question: why do some law firms still maintain this system if evidence has demonstrated that undermine lawyers' mental well-being and increase the risk of making a mistake advising clients? It doesn't make sense. And to me, I think that we need a strong leadership in the legal industry. Well, we need more leaders. If it's possible, more women in the high positions, because in Spain, for instance, 20% of women are partners. I mean, for this reason, questions related to diversity, equality, and inclusion have to take into account in all of these policies. There are a lot of challenges In my case, for instance, in Spain, after the dissolution of the Mental Health Institute of Legal Professions, it was a very sad moment in my life, because I spent almost, well, three years working many hours to change the legal culture in my country. And okay, yes, we did some things, like publishing the first report on Spanish lawyers' well-being and health, the enactment of the a charter, business. It was a charter, a soft law instrument, which wanted companies and law firms to work together to improve the workplace culture. In fact, in the United Kingdom, I don't know if you know, but there is an initiative, the Mindful Business Charter, and thanks to this soft law instrument, different players in the legal industry agree with some minimum well-being policies. And it's a good way to improve changes in the legal sector. But I think that clients have the key, because if a client is sensitive to this issue, for instance, at this moment, there are companies that when they have to decide what law firm they want to hire, questions related to diversity, inclusion, well, these factors are taken into account. Why not well-being issues? Because if I'm a client, I want my lawyer to advise me in the best way possible. And I need this lawyer to be healthy. But I mean, it's normal. But considering that it's not tangible, in the sense that you cannot calculate in the short term what's the cost. Maybe there are some rigid minds, legal minds, that they don't pay attention. But to me, it's quite obviously, because if you are working 14, 16 hours, I don't want this lawyer to represent me. But not because I don't trust him or her. No, because he or she is exhausted. He or she needs to take a rest, to be productive, to provide the best legal advice. It's logical. The Americans are very pragmatic. And in a report in 2017, they say reasons to take action to improve lawyers' well-being. Well, they say three things. It's good for business, good for clients, and the right thing to do. Why are we waiting for to change this culture? This is my personal opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manel. I think it all comes back to the point that a few people have made today. Lawyers are human beings. We're not yet machines. The machines have not yet taken over. And that means we need to sleep, we need to eat. Occasionally we need to see the outside world, not too often, of course, but occasionally. You wouldn't want to get a tan or anything, you know, as you can see with me, that's clearly not a risk I'm facing. And being a human being is very, very important. So thank you to all our fabulous speakers for their insights. And we turn the floor over now to the Q&A portion of today's panel, if anyone has any questions. Now, those of you who watch me present Tag Time know there are 3 rules that apply to questions. The first rule is a question if it ends with a question mark. If it doesn't, it's a sentence. Please ask questions. Second, please try to keep your question to 3 lines or less. We want to answer as many questions as possible, so no paragraphs, please. And third, With such excellent panelists, the temptation to ask questions about all manner of things is high. They could have really good restaurant recommendations in DC, for example. We don't want to be focusing on that for now, though. This is a panel about well-being and balance. So please kindly save any other questions for the networking session. So does anyone have a question for us? Can we, oh, fabulous. Look at that. We've got another microphone. He's the host with the most.
Thank you so much for this educative session. Kristen mentioned something that it's important to have your network of people that you can rely upon. I just wanted to ask, with how you're mentioning the work culture is and how busy it is, what it requires you to commit on a daily basis, does it give you time to establish that support network or have those meaningful relationships that you can rely upon when you would need them?
Great question, because if you're busy working, where do you find the mentors, sponsors, colleagues to call? We had an event in New York, I think, arbitral jeopardy, and someone, had a difficult question, and the solution was call a friend. And when I started out the first 3 years, I needed to sometimes call a friend. Because, arbitration is a procedural mechanism of resolving disputes. And sometimes a lot of answers are not in the textbooks, right? It's in practice, right? You get to know from doing the work, how it's going to proceed. So sometimes I really needed to call a friend. And I think it's important for you, if you're in law school, to stay connected with your classmates, because your classmates, sometimes you need a friend in a different country, in a different jurisdiction. You can always phone a friend and text and ask, I'm facing this issue, do you have any thoughts about this? I think that's important to stay in touch with your friends, and not only because they are going to be the future arbitration practitioners, they'll also be your future in-house counsel. They're going to be your future clients. They're going to be your future colleagues. It might be your opposing counsel. It might even be the arbitrator you appoint in your next case. So I feel that you don't have to necessarily carve out time, but it's in the journey of attending law school, going for arbitration events, joining the young practitioner group events. I think that's how you build some sort of community and a support network. So I remember the chairman of an arbitral board told me, Kirsten, you spend too much time in the office, because, he said, for 7 years, I didn't know you did arbitration. I was like, what? Because, I was holed up in the room, and just focusing on the work. But he said it's important to also let people know that you're doing arbitration, have some sort of a network. And then that's how I got involved in the young practitioner group. So that's something I share with the younger generations now, because that's something I learned late, in life, 7 years in practice. So I highly recommend that. So if you ever, need to, phone a friend. Jose.
Thank you. Could any of you speak on the issue about the perception, misperception that mental health issues might be more attached to women than to men, I think that it is clearly a prejudice, but how do you tackle that? I mean, how do you inform people that, oh no, that's not necessarily the case? That's question number one, and question number two is could you also refer to perhaps existing or a little bit more to the issue of a lot of the appointments in arbitration are related to reputation. So basically, to the ideal of the balance, literally the balance that you can see in a piece of art, you should see in justice, the balance itself. And a lot of that is basically done ideally to have a balanced counsel, balanced arbitrators, balanced everywhere. Do you think that there's a perception that if there's more admission as to the lack of balance in the profession, that would or might bite in the tail professionally many of the arbitration practitioners and their aspirations? So I think that those 2 points are important, because and both are much related to prejudice and preconceptions. So I mean, we have an excellent panel, so I think that many of you can speak about that.
Thank you very much. So who would like to start? Two good points. One addressing the misperception that it's that mental health issues disproportionately affect one gender, and a second point relating to, I suppose, almost the importance of visible role models who are prepared to talk about the fact that they're not robots, and occasionally they may have well-being issues.
How about I take the first part and I'll hand it off to somebody.
Thank you
You
very
can
much.
get ready for the second part. What I would say is, so we emphasize women today, right? That was part of this conversation, but that's not what we do in all our conversations. Because while there is gender disparity, that doesn't mean men aren't struggling. So we have a lot of those conversations. We look at the statistics. We have a lot of, I'm trying to actually think about, so we have a group of volunteer attorneys who they themselves have struggled with something and kind of come out and do programs like this. They mentor people through the lawyer assistance program. And actually, I would say more of them are men than women. So we have men come out and have the conversations, and I think that'll connect to kind of the next answer, but that having these conversations that said, I have struggled or I am struggling is really, it's really how you break the stigma. It's having people on this panel that said, I really struggled with burnout, with well-being issues. And it's looking at the statistics. All you have to do is look at the statistics to know that while maybe women are eking it out, it doesn't mean that the men are a zero, right? So I think both having those conversations regularly are really important. But having the faces are probably the most important part, I would say, of this, however that looks, and whoever wants to take over that next part of role modeling.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Who would like to say anything?
Did Munia want to say something?
Munia, did you want to say something?
I'm sorry, I was reading the questions in the chat, actually.
We're going to get to those in a minute, I promise. We'll get to those in a minute.
I just wanted to maybe add.
Thank you.
If I may add to Nikki's comments in response to who was there, I think it was a great question. I think anecdotally, there are more women in law schools. So I think when we talk about the attrition rates, when based on percentage, it seems like, wow, a lot of women leave the profession. But I think it's because, at least what I've seen is from the Singapore context, at least, that 70% of those in law school were women. So when we talk about the 75% that leave in the first 3 years, a lot of them are women. And so I think that's one aspect. The second is, I actually have had candid conversations with my male colleagues, and they do face pressures, and they say that they want to be as present at home as a dad, and it shouldn't be left to the mom. So I think that a lot of my male colleagues also want to be, carrying part of the burden. And I think it's not fair to assume that because you're a man at work, that you don't need to be as present at home. So I think a lot of that is maybe generational. I think in some ways, to be honest, I had a very frank conversation with a managing partner about the billable hours. And he said, but Kirsten, what's the alternative? So there is a sense in some firms that it's a sort of like a revolving door. If you can put in the 2,400 hours and more, and if you burn out, fine, you leave, and it's a revolving door. We get, someone even told me there's a long waiting line after you leave. We can always easily replenish, right? So we're not robots, but we're kind of treated as that, because if you leave, there's somebody there, 10 other people waiting to get your place. So in the sense that there's no incentive for the firms to sort of change the system. And a lot of them are asking, so if we don't have the billable hour system, what can we do in place? And I questioned the efficiency of that. And I see some senior colleagues online as well. I mean, I'm curious to know if there is a solution, an alternative to the billable hours, because as we become more senior, it takes us less time to finish the task, right? So when you're a first year associate, you have to draft a submission that's 400 pages long. It takes you a long time, right? Because you're trying to figure out how to complete the submission. But as you become more experienced, it takes less time. You're more efficient. You know exactly what's expected. You can plan ahead. But the more efficient you become, the less hours you need to clock in to finish the task. So it's just counterintuitive. The more experienced, the more efficient you get, the less hours you clock. And to the firm, it means you're doing less good because you have less hours recorded. So it doesn't promote efficiency. I think the current billable hour system does not do that. But the struggle is, what can we do in place of it? So until we have like a good alternative, I think that's the struggle we have to live with at the billable hour system. And I'm happy to see if there's any suggestions on Zoom as to what that alternative could be.
Can I
yeah, yes,
say,
Mia.
not on the chat questions, but of course there's fixed rate, there's other things. Clients are also worried about the billable system themselves. Not everybody's happy to see thousands of hours in their bills coming up every month. But also the higher you get, actually the higher your billed. You are maybe double the price of junior associate, but you're still required the same hours. So I mean, even on the pricing, something that econometric wise doesn't make tons of sense. So that's, for me, like, it's still questionable, and there might be alternatives there where you're not necessarily supposed to do 2,000 hours if you're billed way higher.
One last point on the female well-being disparity. Some terrifying statistics. Male suicide rates are 3 times higher than female suicide rates. Men are statistically less likely to access help for mental health problems. Men are statistically more likely to use alcohol and drugs to cope with mental health problems instead of talking about them or seeking help. Men are nearly twice as likely to suffer from lung cancer and heart disease than women, and 1 in 3 men have been the victims of domestic violence. It's not really a pretty picture if you actually drill down into the statistics. So it's all very well seeing well-being as a female problem. It's not a female problem. This is a problem that affects all of us. And it's really important that we don't see it as a soft topic that should be sidelined and seen as a sort of women's issue or anything like that.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, trying to ask the expert, in our Washington D.C. area, Nikki, do you think that there is likely to be a change of mentality? It's hard, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't know, whether we can change mentality. I don't think that it's biological. I don't think that it's a matter of being male or female. I think that there's culture behind it, but it's hard.
Yeah. Glacial change. That's what I would say. Yes, I think there's change. I think I started here in 2010 at the bar. I think I've seen change in the 12 years I've been here, but I think it's slow. And I think that's how culture changes. Like societally, I think we could look at this. We could extrapolate this out beyond the law, right? I think generationally, you look at this younger generation that is much more apt to seek help, to seek therapy. It's normal to go to therapy for any kind of gender identity. Whereas that is not true in late, the older you get. So I do think there is a shift that is happening. I just think it's a really slow one. And I think law is it really likes precedent. So it is an even slower moving ship maybe than other areas, but I do think it's different. I joke with my boss, when she first started in 16 years, she was like, I would call law firms and like offer our services, like, let me come in to talk to you. I know people are like struggling. And the law firms will be like, oh, we do not have anybody like that here. Go, but that, Arnold Reporter down the street definitely has that problem, Whereas now we actually get firms calling us and saying, come in, do presentations. We want to have these programs. So it's slow, but I do think it's happening. And I think it's starting in law schools. They're ahead of the kind of the legal profession, or, the attorneys. So I do think it is happening. I think it's slow, but I think the more we have these conversations, the kind of faster it will move, if that's helpful. There's hope.
Thank you, Nikki. I promised we would do the question from Zoom. So let's do the question from Zoom first. So this is a combination of a question from Isabel and Angela. How do you suggest bringing up conversations about the 5 Ps and work-life balance as a junior attorney without fear of retribution? And Angela adds, my question is the same as Isabel's, especially for junior associates who are increasingly getting more responsibilities and they want those opportunities, but they still desire work-life balance. She does acknowledge that that is a sentence and not a question, so we won't penalize her for that. Anybody have any thoughts? How do we bring up the 5 Ps conversation before we have the nervous breakdown? Kristen, this could be one for you.
Thanks, Randy, and thank you as well, and Angela, for the questions. I think, so the first P, I think, is about setting priorities, and that's on a personal level. You have to sort of reflect and evaluate what is important to you, because everyone has different priorities and in different stages of life, right? As to people, I think that is several factors go into that. One is your peers, right? For the first 5 years of life, I think I was able to make it through the tough period because I had friends in the same situation. We were going commiserating. If you're going through the same process, you're going through the same struggles, right, shared trauma. But you have friends and peers, and like phone a friend and discuss what the issues are. And I think knowing that you're not alone, that's important, like reducing isolation and actually brainstorming ideas. Because we're like, okay, we have this problem, so how can we deal with it as a peer group, right? So I think that helps when you're especially a junior associate. I think someone has asked that. And then from there, I think then talk to your mentors, because you would be either assigned a mentor or you'll find someone at the workplace, who you can talk to. Who my first mentor was in the first firm I was at? It was actually an IP partner. IP law, right? Nothing to do with arbitration, but she cared about what I was enduring, So I thought, wait a minute, this is someone whose door was always open to me, and whenever I had issues, I would be able to drop in and to have a chat with her, and that helped me in the first few years of practice. It need not be an arbitration person; it could be somebody else in the firm who just genuinely cares, So I think find that support network and have those conversations with people who are ready and willing to listen, give a listening ear. So that's, I think, hopefully one of the recommendations.
I'm going to piggyback on that. I think that's right. I actually talk a lot with clients about finding mentors that are not in your practice, right? Because then you're not worried about your job. You're not worried about their perception of you as an attorney. So, right, having somebody in IP that you're really not showing up to work in front of them, I think actually really can make a big difference. And then you can go to them and say, is it realistic that I say I need to leave today to take my dog to the vet? Like, you can ask them kind of questions that don't feel as loaded, that you might not be asking somebody kind of within your practice area, I think is really important. So that connection space. And then the other is, at the end of the day, all of this is boundaries, right? Like, it's the practice of setting boundaries, which nobody teaches us and is really hard. So ask for help. Like, that's the hardest thing, and I think part to do, but ask for help, whether it's from your friends, whether it's from a mentor, whether it's from somebody in your religious community, whether it's from a professional. Ask for help around how to set boundaries. There are some amazing books on how to set boundaries. Start there and practice. And it's really about tolerating discomfort, which I know nobody really likes to do, but it's navigating, how do I tolerate the discomfort of trying something that is scary? You're going to do a lot of scary things as an arbitrator, right? Like, going in front of rooms of people and talking can be really scary, but so can saying no. and figuring out how to do that, but like learning to tolerate that discomfort, I think is really essential. But ask for help and find some resources. There are so many resources out there right now for you. Kind of don't be afraid to do that. Yes, asking for help is not a sign of weakness, not at all.
And it applies equally if you are having mental health problems.
100%.
Asking for help is not a weakness. People who are going through mental health problems are fighting dragons on a daily basis. The strength of mind it requires to get up in the morning, if you are going through a major mental health crisis, and continue to practice and continue to operate. And many people are perfectly capable of operating. It's just they go home in the evening and quietly, struggle internally and have to collapse in on themselves a little bit. It doesn't mean they can't practice. So do not see asking for help as a weakness. Did we have one more question?
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up. Like Kristen, you have mentioned that it's not a linear progression. Sometimes you have to step down, but it's not like something practical, I think, for a junior associates, because as you said, evolving doors, sometimes it's very hard to communicate with others, especially if you really want to talk with your supervisor. Do you have such experience if you want to step down on something, but you don't really want to hurt your careers? What is the art of your communication, you think? And if you have such an experience on that, thank you.
So my answer to that managing partner who told me that, it's unfortunate, but the associates are a revolving door, right? Okay, once done and dusted, you will take a new person. So I was brainstorming ideas here. What if we become irreplaceable? What would distinguish us from another associate junior? So that's why I strive to encourage the juniors to think about what would make you different, right? So at the time, 7 years ago, I thought I could make myself different if I did another specialization. So in addition to international arbitration, public international law, I dabbled in aviation, international aviation, because I wanted to sort of differentiate. So if the firms think that we are a revolving door, I need to find a way to make myself indispensable, right? Irreplaceable. So I would encourage you, and in fact, I think another eminent male arbitrator said, he doesn't, when he looks at CVs, he doesn't look, arbitration. He actually looks for what's not arbitration, like what's in addition to that makes this person special. So I would highly encourage you to think about, okay, how do I distinguish myself? Find something else, a niche area that is, that is different, right? And then you become less of, anybody else. So that is something I leverage on your strengths and your comparative advantage.
Thanks, that's very instructive.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'm conscious that people have other exciting things to do, and we're going to have some networking as well. So we're poised to head off for some networking in a second, whether online or in person. Our online delegates will have Manal and Munia on the line. And for those in the room, well, we look forward to continuing the discussion. You know who we are now, so you can avoid us or come and talk to us, depending on how you're feeling. So on that note, it remains for me to thank our excellent panel. So I ask you to please show your appreciation for them in the usual way. And for those on the screen who are speakers, if you could bear with us before we go back to the networking, because we want to do a screenshot where everybody is looking at the camera and not posing with their mouth open, or, this kind of thing. Thank you so much.
And before, while the picture is being taken, thank you very, very much to our wonderful panelists. We really have an incredible number of panelists, from business development into arbitration, how to make yourself indispensable, and also the incredible resources from our DC bar. Thank you again to Miller and Chevalier for hosting us today. And we will be back for our last panel at site, which is human rights and business. So in an hour's time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for the speakers, if everybody can very kindly look at we're going to do the photograph. So what appears on the screen is what we're going to get. So if everybody can very kindly look at their cameras, smile, pretend you like each other, the usual.
I thought we did like each other.
You're very good at pretending. I get it. All right, everybody, kindly look at the camera. Big smiles. 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for tuning in. Our online audience, we love you all. We're really sorry you can't be here to eat the cookies, but there are only so many to go around. So enjoy your networking. They've probably gone into their networking already. So I'm just talking to myself now. That's okay. It's not a commentary on my life in general.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, this is good. Thank you very much.
Discussion. Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you.
Very nice to meet you.
You too.
Yeah. I hope that it wasn't too much of a hard reality of the questions that I asked, but I think.
No, it's
No.
true. It's worth. It's really worth. talking
This is
about.
what we came for, so.
That is so true. So
Yeah.
true.
We're very grateful for the opportunity.
No,
Yes.
I think that it turned out very well. We might edit the reference to, we might edit the reference to Marvel.
I
thought
was-
about that after I did it.
I was
I was like
thinking-
just thinking
not-
of a random.
Yeah, not.
And then somebody in the chat was
I've
like, that's
turned
why I
the-
left.
I've turned this off.
Okay, no
No.
worries.